in addition to technical skills, understanding your business. And that one you acquire by spending time with business. And sometimes, you just have to educate yourself. I know, watch some YouTube videos, read business books about specific products or models. Because if you have that business perspective, you would probably not propose them some solutions that, don't work. It could work perfectly from a tax perspective, but from a business perspective, they would say, yeah, you probably don't understand what we're doing here.
Bruce, Bruce. Welcome everyone to the Bizarro Brews podcast. Today on our podcast, we're joined by Oleh, who's a senior tax product manager for EMEA at Uber. With a career spanning Ukraine, Sweden, and the Netherlands, Oleh brings a unique global perspective on how technology, regulation, and innovation intersect on modern tax. In this episode, we'll explore his journey from legal beginnings to leading cross-border tax strategy at one of the world's most dynamic tech companies. So without further ado, let's bring on Oleh. Welcome, Oleh. Welcome to the Bizarro Brews podcast. How are you doing?
No, I'm doing great. Hi, Adam. And thanks for inviting me. It's a long time since we talked last time, so excited about this podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know it's late over there, so thank you so much for staying on and helping out. I'm really interested because I first came across your profile on LinkedIn, and it said senior product manager of tax, and I'm like, what does a senior product manager in tax mean? Do you develop tools in house? And that's how I reached out, and you were kind enough to walk me through that process. So I'm really excited for the users to hear that, the viewers to hear that as well. So, but before we jump into that, we usually start off by asking our guests to talk about their journey, why they chose tax, because nobody grows up saying oh, I want to be a tax accountant or a tax professional, right? Unless you probably said it at when you were 7 years old. So take us through that journey, why you chose
Sure.
tax and how you got into the profession.
Yeah, sure. Happy to walk you through my journey. Yes, it's true. First of all, I'm a tax lawyer, right? And I think when I was a kid, I never dreamt about being a tax lawyer or lawyer in principle. But at a high school, I made a decision that I'm going to be a lawyer. And I even probably didn't know about tax law. I was thinking more about something like criminal law or something. I wanted to be prosecutor. So was, got a chance to get into law school and started working on basic principles of law, criminal law, etc. And then I think one of the professors told me, or to our group, that if you go into traditional field of law, there's going to be a lot of competition. So you should aim at one of the most complex areas of law. And he didn't mention tax law, but I think, or maybe tax law was one of them. And he said, first of all, you'd probably make most of it in terms of money, and plus the competition would be lower comparatively to something that is easier to grasp. And especially tax law, lawyers, they're not good with numbers usually. I try to bust this assumption, but yeah, that was my decision. Basically, when I was studying at law school, I think halfway through, I realized that tax law is quite complex, not a lot of competition, and yeah, it's pretty cool. All the tax lawyers I saw back then were, quite successful lawyers.
So then you transitioned from being tax law into going in public accounting. So you were at EY, and then you made the jump to go in-house. Is that in the US over here? That's pretty common of a route, right? You go public accounting, you learn your skill set, and then you might transition in over there. What about talk us about where you were growing up, how in that environment, in Europe specifically, how does that play out?
Yeah, so in Europe, it's true, I was part of EY and I spent quite some years at EY, but at EY at least, or all the big four accounting firms, you have division between tax accountants and tax lawyers.
Okay.
So tax lawyers, we usually work on advisory projects. So let's say a client approaches you, there is M&A or restructuring, and you have to advise them from a tax law perspective. You, of course, work together with tax accountants, but you specialize in interpreting laws and creating a structure or forming a tax due diligence more from a tax law perspective. You don't check journal entries, or you need to have a basic understanding, but you focus on tax law interpretation, case law. You You may even go into some tax controversy like tax audit. So that was my angle. I never did true tax accounting, even though I was involved in some projects, but we have a separation. And that was actually, I started at the law firm and then I got an opportunity to join EY. And that naturally, of course, prepared me working with different clients, multinational clients. I think that was a great way to got an in-house role at Uber.
And then whenever someone starts in tax, and tax, as you said, is like one of the most complicated fields of like law over there because a lot of nuance, a lot of gray. I think it like takes a certain years and certain projects to get on to finally start understanding what's happening around you. I think that was true for me, but I was from more of an accounting background and you're from a law background. So I think you have more of a specifics, more of an understanding of what's happening in the entire sphere of tax. So was there a point or a project when you were at EY where you're like, okay, now I finally understand what I'm doing, or finally understand the bigger picture at play?
There was a moment, I think actually I got that moment only when I was in-house at Uber. Honest. Of course, Big Four advisory roles, they gave me that understanding, but you're still more on the advisory side. You don't see the full cycle. Or
Yeah.
even if you're involved in projects where you kind of claim that you see the full cycle, you only see true end-to-end cycle when you represent a client. So you sit on the client side, right? What was, I think, extremely helpful for me at the beginning of my career. So I started as at a law firm, and then I transitioned to the Big Four, to EY, and that's when I moved there, it was not that prestigious. To be honest, like working at the law firm, I had higher pay and I think cooler projects, but it wasn't, there were some circumstances that basically almost forced me to go to EY. And at the beginning, I thought I joined those accountants. What I'm doing here, when I was at the law firm, I had a nice suit. Now I have to sit in this open space with 50 people. But first of all, I was exposed to a broader group of people. So not only tax lawyers, but accountants, auditors. There were also, I think, financial services, transactional services. Plus, what I realized, a lot of was centered around accounting. And at a law firm, you don't have exposure to accounting, or at least not that much. On the one hand, maybe it was not that fancy, but from a personal and maybe like educational growth perspective, exposure to all these multinational clients, I learned a lot. And now looking back, I have no regrets about that shift.
So what were like some of the projects that you worked on then during your time at EY that like gave you that global perspective? Were you mostly like mergers and acquisitions kind of person? Were you like advising on global restructuring? What was that landscape like?
Because I started, I'm originally from Ukraine. I started at EY Ukraine. The office was relatively small. I think the entire national practice was a couple hundred people, including tax and auditors, maybe I think like 500 people in total, the whole firm. Okay. So the tax team was, I don't know, maybe 50 people. So you didn't have that luxury of working on just one type of projects. So I was involved in different projects. I had a lot of M&A projects like due diligence and then structuring. But I also had a fair amount of pure advisory projects. So let's say there is a big multinational and they change their business model and they need to understand, okay, how that new business model is going to work. Or they have pretty like simple, not simple, maybe it's relatively simple question, but there is a huge price tag behind it. Can we deduct this expense? And then back then there was no ChatGPT, no AI, and I literally spent many days on researching case law and finding arguments why we can deduct that expense. Learned tremendously from that.
So like, all right, what was the longest time you've ever spent on like trying to do a research project?
I think a couple of days. The worst thing is that, let's say you spend 3 days going through all possible case law. I mean, it was still, there were like databases, say like LexisNexis, something like that, but national one. And you spend all these days, you try to find using different keywords. And then by keyword, of course, it's not very precise what you get. So you have to read this 15, 20 pages of text. And then you go through many case law. And then you go back to your manager and they say, okay, so you spent 3 days. What's the outcome? And you say nothing. And he's like, no way. So you spent 3 days and you're telling me there is no case law support in this position. And obviously the question was not, let's just find what court says. It was,
Mhm.
let's find what works for us. Obviously, not always you can find
Yeah.
something that supports your client's position. And then you go back after 3 days of research. Of course, obviously, it was not only research. I had some other, maybe like emails, meetings, but in principle was working on research. You go back and then you say, sorry, there is nothing. And it was difficult for your manager to believe that there's nothing after 3 days.
Well, because sometimes that is the answer, right? There is no like case law. Sometimes like you're looking at such a unique position that there's no right answer. Like I think you probably saw that Netflix earnings came out and they had to take like that big
Yes. Yeah.
Brazil position. And that's such a unique, and if you read the transcript and like you look at the earnings, they took the position because another company had like a judgment against them in code and they had to follow that. Sometimes tax laws could be like so opaque that you just have to get your best judgment or more likely than not situation.
Yeah, yeah, true. And if you work for a public company, this more likely than not is your like basically daily terminology. And this is what I enjoy actually about in-house is that if you work on the advisory side, right, you come up with your best arguments, you make a couple of caveats, and you just deliver that memo.
Yeah.
And you don't know what's going to be the final outcome. Maybe the client will tell you eventually. But when you're on the in-house side, and irrespective of any memo case law, you still have to take a position. And there is like special thought process. It depends on your risk appetite,
Yeah.
depends on your experience in a particular jurisdiction. And yeah, this more likely than not is something that I'm very familiar with.
So, do you think like you're writing more memos now or than when you were at EY? Because now you have to take a position and you have to justify your position in house.
I'm not writing more memos now. Obviously, I have to write some memos, but they are crisp to the point. Because
Yeah.
again, I don't need to make any caveats. Nobody cares about caveats. I need to provide a concrete position, and I need to be ready that there's going to be somebody on the other side, usually
Yeah.
an auditor from the Big Four, and they will ask me questions. So I need to be ready to support that position. And another thing, what is great about in-house role is that you can reach out to your advisor and ask them to
Yeah.
draft that memo.
Oh yeah. So now you're like back, you're with the client. So you're not EY's client now instead of just being or whatever the big four firm like your firm is using. So now you're the client.
Yes, yes, yes. And it's law firms and Big Four.
Yeah. And then, okay, so now let's talk about some of your in house experience. What prompted the move to go in house? How did that journey come about? And what has some of your biggest learnings been since going in house?
Yeah, interesting question. So first of all, my friend referred me to the role at Uber.
Yeah.
He wasn't in that role and he moved to a different function, and there was an opening and he made a suggestion. And my first reaction was, yeah, why would I even consider in-house? I think I'm fine at EY where I am at that point. But then, after a couple of weeks thinking about that, I started asking myself, I started challenging my initial reaction. Am I really happy? Does it make sense what I do? Because I was, at that point in time, I was in a transfer pricing team. I had a lot of projects around TP documentation. That was a thing back then. Right now, I think it's more automated. I had a lot of, like these functional interviews, working with different clients. These were not the hottest projects. I mean, it was bread and butter of TP, and I had a lot of this kind of projects. But I asked myself, does it really make sense? Do I see like the actual implementation, how the project runs end to end? Basically, I answered to myself eventually that no, I'm spending time on something, but
Mhm.
I don't see what's the end goal of what I'm doing. And I didn't have an intention to become a partner because, yeah, of course, if you want to become a partner, probably that makes sense. But I realized, no, I'm probably not going to be a partner. So why not? Uber is an interesting company, like digital native. There are a lot of tax cases around Uber. So I thought, yeah, if I join Uber, probably I'm going to learn a lot, and I would work not only with tax lawyers and accountants, but was the broader group of people, which is actually the case. Yeah, after a couple of weeks of back and forth internal conversations, I decided, yeah, worth trying it. And actually, I'm super happy about my decision. It's actually 6.5 years ago I made that choice, and still happy.
So, like, okay, so Uber, extremely big company,
Hmm.
started off with ride sharing, and now it's like there's Uber Eats, there's Uber Delivery, and now there's like I think in some areas they're also delivering packages and goods as well. And right now I saw this one feature come about where people can do tasks upon it, so that machine learning is getting implemented as well. How do you guys manage all of that? And it's just like, it seems like there you must have like, how many people first is in the European EMEA tax team, and like in overall in general?
I think overall we have globally like 200 plus people in tax. Yes. But on the other hand, we operate in 70 plus markets. And if you look at our valuation, it's like around 200 billion. So it's a huge org. So I think like 200 plus people sounds a lot, but it's actually, if you look at our scale, it's not. It's pretty lean organization, I would say. How do we manage that? Yeah, we have centralized teams per region. So I'm in the region EMEA. The whole team sits in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands. I think we have roughly 40 people, tax lawyers, tax accountants together, some tax technology people, and yeah, we just try to scale our expertise. So instead of having, I know, tax lawyer, tax accountant per jurisdiction, we try to hire bright people who can cover at least a couple of regions. Some people who are subject matter experts in, say, indirect tax, transfer pricing. So I think it reminds me a bit of Big Four or a law firm with a bit of like specialization, and we just try to manage our tax matters at scale using that kind of metric structure.
For you guys, is it more like to manage all of that? Because I'm assuming you're saying, like you said, it's pretty lean, and I can understand like you guys must be covering a lot. So do you guys like implement a lot of technology? Are you like technology heavy in terms of like what you can achieve and automate?
Yeah, for sure. We are a technology heavy, and we're like digital native company. So we have a lot of engineers who support different functions, but including tax function.
Yeah.
So for instance, every year, it's actually right now in October, November, we have planning for the next year, and we reach out to the or actually engineering team reaches out to us and they ask us, hey, give us the list of the projects that you would like to implement so that we include this into pipeline. And then engineers, if the projects that we propose to them, if it hits their kind of materiality threshold, they prioritize them and they build tools for us internally. And to be fair, we also acquire some tools. We have fair share of built in technology built in house, including for tax.
That's like interesting, because like in my mind, how usually like tax technology goes is like, hey, you have a need, there's a tool in the market, you go acquire it, you bring it in
Mhm.
house, and like you implement it, right? There's tax research tools, tax work papers, transfer pricing tools, all of those, and there's like vendors for it. So what's the percentage for like a company like Uber where you develop technology in house for like your use cases compared to like what you guys go ahead and get those from the broader market?
I think, to be honest, I don't have full visibility. My kind of ballpark estimate would be, I don't know, 50-50, which I think is like 50% in-house built is a lot. And the reason it's not that we want to save money or we don't trust vendors. We have huge scale and our internal systems are pretty complex. So unfortunately, many products that exist, in the outside world, they simply cannot work in our environment, either because of scale or complexity or a combination of scale and complexity. Plus, even if it happens, or let's say in 2020 we bought something, we have every year so many updates and developments that I think maintaining that tool for the vendor would be quite costly. But having said that, like we also rely on some external tools. We basically have an internal analysis. Okay, how much would it take us to build it internally? Are we confident that that tool would work as we expect? Would it work in the next 2, 3, 5 years? If we think that it's cost efficient and we kind of integrate it more or less seamlessly into our stack, then we can go for an external tool. But if we have hesitation around cost, or if we have resource, sometimes the question is, okay, we have this resource, why do we need to go outside and buy it? Let's just build it internally.
So that's really interesting. So now let's talk about a little more about the way that like your work style has probably changed from working in different teams. So you were at a law firm, then you worked in-house at EY. and then you're now at Uber, like working at the lean team. It's like how have you had to adapt in terms of your leadership style and your working style between these different roles? What helped, and like what have you picked up along the way that have like really cemented you as like a tax professional?
Okay, interesting question. I think you would have to help me remind me some of the aspects of your
Yeah.
question. Let me start with this. So, when you work on the advisory side, Big Four law firm, you would naturally tend to focus on a specific field of law. And basically, in the Western world, I mean like US, Western Europe, when you join Big Four a law firm, you would probably really just work on indirect tax or transfer pricing or direct tax accounting. That is obviously not the case when you go in-house, unless you probably, I don't know, go to the in-house team of 500 people, like I can imagine like Amazon or Amazon of the world. They probably still have that specialization. When you go in-house, especially mid-cap size company, you would have to cover a number of taxes. And that's at first, it's a bit challenging and you're anxious about that. But at some point, you enjoy that. Once you get a bit of experience, you feel confident, and that's really helpful because when you discuss with business any new initiative, right, you cannot just say, "Oh, I'm like indirect tax. I don't know what like we can do this, but from indirect tax perspective that works, but from a transfer pricing, tax accounting that doesn't work. I don't know. I have to talk to my colleagues." So that's I think that's cool that you can be a business partner to your business team.
Yeah.
And when you discuss specific product or initiative, maybe you don't have all the answers, but you already know, okay, these are going to be problematic areas. Let's say from an indirect tax perspective that works, tax accounting, okay, no big impact, but I don't know, transfer pricing doesn't work here or doesn't make sense. So that's the shift that you're no longer deep tax expert in a specific field, you become more of a generalist. So you have a broader picture. Second thing, what I like about that is you start translating, and that may sound like a cliche, but it's actually true that you translate complex tax issues, concepts into business friendly language. And I rarely see people who work at Big Four or law firm who can actually do this efficiently. There are some people who do that, but I think junior people or those who have, say, 5, 7 years, you can rarely see them, delivering their message in an efficient way,
Yeah.
effective way. So it's easier to like understand it. Sometimes I even question myself, ask myself a question: Do they understand what they tell me?
Well, so then that brings like a really important question, right? What core skill set, besides like having technical tax knowledge, have made the biggest impact or the difference in your success so far as an individual? Like, what have you like personality traits have you picked up? Be like, okay, this really helps me along.
Yeah, so first of all, technical skill set, you cannot avoid that. If you are going to work for a company like Uber, you really need to have core, strong technical skill set. Why? Because most of the time you don't have enough time to do your research. You cannot, like, if somebody is asking you, our competitor has launched this product, we have to refocus and implement something new in the next couple of days. You cannot tell business, you know what, I need to take 1 week to just think about that. And if you have strong technical skills, you don't need 1 week. You probably know an answer already. You have a gut feeling that it works this way. And I'm not talking only about your like academical skill. So it's a combination of good academic background plus years of experience in advisory. That okay, this sounds right, this sounds wrong. It's a starting point. Second thing is that you have to spend a lot of time with business to understand their terminology, understand what are their KPIs. Because, so to give you an example, when I just joined Uber, I thought it probably takes me a couple of weeks to just understand how everything works here, and I will be pretty fine. But I think it took me at least 1 year to get an understanding how the business works and what is the business terminology. So that's something that is usually overseen. So for instance, when we enter new market and we get on board new law firm or Big Four, it takes us many, many months to educate them, because at the beginning they offer us something that doesn't even fit into our model, or they just don't understand the business. So the second point, in addition to technical skills, understanding your business and that one you acquire by spending time with business. And sometimes, you just have to educate yourself. I know, watch some YouTube videos, read business books about specific products or models. Because if you have that business perspective, you would probably not propose them some solutions that, don't work. It
Yeah.
could work perfectly from a tax perspective, but from a business perspective, they would say, yeah, you probably don't understand what we're doing here. And what else on leadership you were asking? Yeah, so again, the difference compared to Big Four or law firm is that now you face a diverse team, people from, I know, marketing, legal, policy, communications. So you need to know how to work with these people. When you say VAT is not deductible here, nobody understands. So
Yeah.
you need to know how to approach them, and they are also strong in their own field. But the fact that they don't understand what I know permanent difference is doesn't mean
Yeah.
that they have strong skills in odd areas. So from a leadership perspective, you need to give them like confidence that I'm an expert. I understand also your functional profile. What are your KPIs, and we will find a way to resolve the problems that we face. So I would say, yeah, this is sort of cross-functional collaboration and being able to like lead different teams that first of all don't report to you and that have different mindset and even like terminology.
Okay. So from what I'm trying to understand is like being able to communicate really well in like language that's like simple enough for everyone to understand and get your point across would be like one of you would say would be
Yeah,
really.
yeah. And in order to communicate this way, you need to understand a bit something about their function and what they try to achieve, right? So, yeah, you need to translate your text language into their kind of business-friendly language, but you also have to, uh, one more thing, you have to empathize with them because they have their business goals. It's not that they, like I know some people, especially when they just join from Big Four or law firm, they always view business teams as those teams who bring problems, who want
Yeah.
to complicate everything. And then I remind people that, you know what, we are here
Yeah.
because they bring tasks for us, and our job is to find a way to make to make their projects happen
Yeah.
and and not block them.
And
So
they're like revenue drivers, right? So
yeah,
revenue.
they are the revenue drivers, right?
Yeah.
We are just a cost center.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, so that's like really different. Yeah, so I think that's like a really big mind shift you have to get starting used to. Like, hey, you have to like advise and like help the company grow overall. So it's like more teamwork in that sense. Yeah. So my next question is like, I talk to like many young professionals, and like when I tell them like I used to work in international tax, they would be like, oh, international tax is great, but I feel like it's very complicated, and they feel intimidated by just like the complexity of international tax. So like what's your advice for someone that wants to get into international tax on how to get started?
Yeah, it's interesting question, and I think at the beginning of my career, or especially when I moved from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction, and I also did my master's abroad, LLM in tax. I did abroad in Sweden, and then I moved from EY Ukraine to EY Netherlands. I think I had a lot of doubts and a lot of anxiety that, oh, it's so complex. But what I realized eventually is that we are all human beings. So let's say if you move to a different department or if you move to a different country, these are the same human beings. They have more or less the same brain power, and you can match them. So if somebody was able to do that, then probably you can also manage that eventually. Of
Yeah.
course, I'm not suggesting you competing with Albert Einstein.
Yeah.
We're just talking about international tax law. How
Yeah.
complicated can that be? So I would say, yeah, it is a complex field. It takes quite some time to get there, but if you go there, step by step at the steady pace, you will eventually be there. And again, just keep in mind that those people who you probably, I know, admire or think, oh my God, that person is a partner with 10 years of experience, they're also human beings and they had exactly the same journey.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Like it takes like you have to get started somewhere. And like you can, if you put in your time, of course it's complex, but you also be must be willing to learn and like learn from like different people and like having good mentors. That brings like my next question would be like, how important has mentorship been to you? Like who have been like your biggest mentors, and like how now you're in that role where you're mentoring other people. What kind of guidance do you provide to people now?
Yeah, so I think I never had a kind of official or slash formal mentor.
Yeah.
I have I had at times some natural mentors, and I think, for instance, my current manager is sort of my mentor. But in a classic definition of like mentor is something who is usually not your manager or maybe doesn't even work with you. It's some sort of role model for you, a person with a bigger amount or number of years of
Yeah.
experience who went through kind of similar paths. So I would say my mentors were people usually with whom I worked,
Yeah.
and I observed them. And sometimes they advised me or gave guidance on, I don't know, how to move forward. We have some sort of a mentorship program at Uber,
Mm-hmm.
and I recently, a couple of months ago, joined that program, and I was lucky to be matched with some tax leader in our org.
Yeah.
And I think I learned, like, we didn't have that much time, but we had a couple of sessions, but pretty deep sessions. It was great to learn that, again, everyone is a human being. Everybody goes through same struggles, but as long as as long as you're persistent, you're open to feedback, and I think most important, as long as you're humble,
Yeah.
you can get there. So I didn't have, to conclude on this, didn't have any formal mentors, but some of the managers or managers of my managers who I encountered in my career were those mentors for me. And it was not only by them telling me or giving me guidance on what to do,
Mm-hmm.
but in many cases it was probably I was just observing them, and that's probably also kind of mentorship in action,
Yeah.
also pretty like useful and impactful.
Yeah.
And also I have like a negative mentorship, if I may frame it. And when I was observing people, and maybe at the moment I didn't realize that, but eventually looking back at some of my experiences and what I went through, I use it now as a kind of guidance what not to do.
Mm. Got
I
it.
mean, some toxic managers or toxic leadership at some companies. So I have some positive examples as I name them, and I also have some negative example. So do's and don'ts.
Yeah. No, yeah, agreed. I think it's also like just being in an environment where you can like see great people work. I think you just pick up so much more from them. And I think it's also motivating because it gives you like a path to be like, okay, I could be in this position one day. And that helps like your career a lot. So I just have like one fun question for you that just came across that I would like to ask is like, if you could redesign one aspect of the global tax system right now, what would you choose and why would that be?
I think it's so difficult to pick it. Yeah, I think, okay, let me just give a try. And
Yeah.
disclaimer, I think there are so many things that I would want to change, but one thing that I would change, and that's because I currently work at a US public company,
Hmm.
I would eliminate any differences between US GAAP, IFRS, and statutory tax rules so that we don't need to have permanent and temporary differences.
Yeah, when you say that, you're wiping out billions of dollars of revenue
Yeah,
in
I know,
consulting advice.
I know, but I'm on the other side of the aisle.
Yes, I can understand why, because there's so many differences and so nuanced, and nobody knows all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, if you're a tax lawyer, you always overlook this. So, you come up with your perfect structure and then realize, okay, we didn't think about all these differences
Yeah.
and should, maybe it won't fly.
It won't fly. Okay. A question that I ask every guest is, once you're done with tax and you retire from tax, like, what do you plan on doing? And everybody always has like a strategy they've thought about their life post tax.
No, I think I will probably, at this point in time, looking forward, I think probably spend most of my time in tax. I don't think it's going to be the same as it is now. I
Yeah.
think with all the developments, AI, etc., it probably would be very different, but I think it would be still a tax field. And then if I retire or when I retire, I will just, I don't know, enjoy my life,
Like, what
not
would
working.
what would enjoyment mean in that life?
Or just having free time, free from any obligations,
Yeah. Okay.
traveling, reading books.
Is it all well? Is it also true because that you guys in Europe, you guys have the summers off, or do you? Is that like a myth now?
It depends. Like if you work for the US company, you pretty much follow US schedule.
So you get
But
4th of
it's
July
true.
off
We have
now.
more vacation days here. But again, it depends. Like, what's your motivation? What's your ambition? And who's your employer?
Yeah. So then, how do you see your? You said you see yourself role changing. What do you in 5 to 10 years? What do you see your role as becoming in tax?
Uh, First of all, I would like to progress further.
Yeah.
Get a bigger scope. But what I'm thinking about, like, if you look back, say 10, or when I started, right? I just mentioned at the beginning of this podcast that I was spending sometimes a couple of days on doing some research.
Hmm.
Now, with the help of the technology, it can take you max, I don't know, 30 minutes, or maybe you're like super smart with prompting and it takes you even 10 minutes. So I think we would be working with some, I don't know, digital assistants, and we would be focusing on maybe like real-time reporting, creating connection with the tax authority. They would have an ability to audit us almost instantly. So that would be a completely different dynamic. So it would be the tax field. But I think in 10, 15, 20 years, the day-to-day scope of responsibilities would be completely different.
And then that will be, yeah, you say like real time reporting, but with how the Pillar 2 rollout has been, with like reporting's been so far, I think like we're far from it.
Yeah, I think tax authorities would eventually refocus on, they would shift to some other sources of, let's say, on the indirect tax side, because now I cover a lot of different taxes. I think they are way more efficient on the indirect tax side of things. And you see there are a lot of advancements there. Because Pillar 2 or income tax, it's usually at the consolidated level. So before you get there, it's such a complicated path to get to the final amount.
Yeah.
With direct taxes, it's easier. It's like at the transactional level, it's just in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think, yes, I do agree on that. There has been a bigger push and there has been more audits happening in the indirect taxes as well. And then we'll see like how that progresses towards like Pillar 2 implementation. I think for you guys, probably like early, yeah, starting this year has been implementation with the notification obligations.
Yeah, yeah. We went through the exercise.
Yeah. So like that has been interesting. Yeah, but thank you so much for joining Ole today. This has been a great conversation, learning from someone that probably does taxes for one of the most complicated structures in the world right now because of like how broad your services are. So thank you for taking the time
Thank you.
today.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Bruce.